gamut, the large picture, the canvas, the larger canvas in which we work, the academic milieu, the landscapes. I think the 21st century has been a defining moment as far as medical education is concerned. A lot has happened and a lot is happening. But I think what has happened is that the COVID pandemic pushed us into start thinking that do we have an effective healthcare delivery system? And that is, I think, was the start point. Are we able to deliver affordable healthcare to the masses? And I think that's where we were found to be wanting. And perhaps globally, healthcare authorities across the globe understood that that's really going to be your budgets, your healthcare budgets required to be addressed. And I think similarly, I think the government of India has also taken it upon itself and improved our health budgets. But more importantly, medical education and the quality of training to our teachers in medical education is important. Now, if you look at the landscape that we are talking about, every year nearly about 90,000, I'm told 90,675 MBBS seats are available in the country. Now, this includes all medical colleges, including AIIMS, JIPMER, central universities, deemed universities, ESI hospitals, medical colleges, private colleges, universities. Now, that's the number. So, 90,000 something. And this number stats is from 18th of February this year. Now, out of these total number of medical seats that we have, 290 medical colleges are from government, 49 are deemed medical colleges, and 265 are private colleges. Now, what has happened is that since over the past few years, the government took it upon itself. I was discussing with Professor Nikhil, the number of seats has increased from what it was just a few years ago of 60,000 to about 90,000 plus. And the government plans to increase it further to about 1 lakh in the next few years. Now, what has happened is, as a result of this increase of the number of seats, suddenly they realized that the human resource, the human capital is not there. You can build buildings, you can build the medical colleges, but where is the human resource? The teachers. So that has been a major issue, which is a challenge today. And this is across globally. We know that it's all institutes. This is going to be a problem. Now, the second question is faculty development. Is our faculty coping up with the changing demands, with newer technology inputs? Are you able to cope up with the different paradigms which have come up in multidisciplinary scenarios? I think that's another challenge, whether how to ensure that all your faculty understands the gamuts and updates themselves from time to time as far as the nuances of medical technology, medical teaching is concerned. The other point which I just wanted to make was that what happened was in 2019, the Medical Council of India brought in this concept of competency-based medical education, which, as you're all aware, that it's knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. Now, the whole issue is that the whole from a curriculum-based medical education, it was now a more holistic package, where it wanted you to be horizontally and vertically aligned with the various needs of Indian medical graduate, as they call it, and add a lot of good things have happened. Things like the OSCEs and various other add-ons, the ADCOM module, and all that has been added to make it a more complete and holistic package. Elective electives, which is, I think, yet another addition. I think these are all add-ons which are going to improve the quality of medical teaching, and I'm sure that even our skilling and upskilling, I think, is for faculty development, will continue to be one of the most important journeys that each teacher has to take. And I think at every level, this teaching has to keep, you have to keep learning and upskilling yourself to what you are. In that context, I thought I must make a mention that, as you are all aware, that Professor Nikhil is also the Vice President of the National Board of Examinations. And the National Board of Examinations is now starting a new skilling center in the heart of the national capital, just opposite AIIMS. They've invested a huge amount of money to make it one of the most contemporary, cutting-edge technology with all the simulators and all what have you from every discipline. So that's going to be really out of the world, a simulator, but they plan to start now in Delhi and then move out to various other places as far as skilling is concerned. So once again, re-emphasizing that skilling will continue to be hugely important. My last point, friends, ladies and gentlemen, is that policy makers, somehow there is a disconnect between medical education and the policy makers. Unless until we have somebody to connect the dots and be the interface between the policy makers and the teachers who actually on ground provide the education. I think it's important because otherwise the policymakers don't understand what exactly is the ground reality, and unless and until you prioritize, you have a vision, you have a roadmap, you understand where the advancement requires to happen, I think we would be found wanting. And it is with these few words, once again, I warmly welcome Professor Nikhil Tandon for this very important oration which is in our academic calendar, harnessing technology for skill enhancement in medical training. With these few words, once again, a very warm welcome to Professor Nikhil Tandon.
It's a privilege to introduce our honorable speaker to the audience. Dr. Tandon is professor and head, Department of Endocrinology and Metabolism at All India Institute, New Delhi. He's an alumnus of the All India Institute, New Delhi, and he was the best graduate of his batch. After his post-graduation in medicine, also from All India Institute, he went to the University of Cambridge, UK for his PhD. When he returned back, he joined as the faculty in the Department of Endocrinology, the department that he heads today. He is an epitome of a clinical investigator. A review of his work shows that he has used clinical knowledge and observation to plan research questions and worked systematically to answer them to bridge translational gaps in the management and prevention of non-communicable diseases, especially diabetes. He is amongst the few researchers who has established and sustained large population-based cohorts, which we all know is difficult to maintain in India, evaluating risk factors for cardiometabolic disorders. His basic research and collaboration with lab-based investigators have led to detailed genotyping on extensively phenotyped individuals, providing unique information about cardiometabolic risks. His involvement in translational research has included innovative use of technology, he'll be speaking on that, including mHealth and implementing interventions to facilitate care delivery for people with diabetes and hypertension, keeping in mind the resource constraints of our country. His research group has been working in the area of diabetes, prevention in women with prior history of gestational diabetes, and has completed the largest global study evaluating the role of lifestyle interventions in preventing diabetes in more than 1,600 women with a prior history of gestational diabetes across Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka. Dr. Tandon heads the technical coordinating unit of the Youth Onset Diabetes Registry supported by the ICMR. He has more than 550 peer-reviewed indexed publications and has been cited nearly 65,000 times. His H index is a mind-boggling 79 and a I-10 index of 303. He was rated amongst the top 1 global authors in the field of endocrinology. Because of his broad-based knowledge, he is a member of various technical advisory groups, both national and international. He has served as chairman of the Research Advisory Committee of the National Institute of Nutrition, and he is member of n number of different other committees. He is a member of the Apex Committee for the of the Department of Biotechnology and the Technical Advisory Group of various national programs. He has served as president of the Endocrine Society of India and the Indian Society for Bone and Mineral Research. He has served the Government of India in various capacities, including member of the Oversight Committee of the Medical Council of India. That was between 2017 and 18. He was member of the Board of Governors, NMC, between 18 and 20, 2018 to 2020. He is a member of the Governing Council and Vice President, as the Vice Chancellor also mentioned, of the National Board of Examinations. His tenure started in 2016. He completed in 2021, and he has another tenure, another 5 years, which will extend till 2026. He has served on various expert groups, including those for updating the WHO definition, diagnosis, and classification of diabetes mellitus and intermediate hyperglycemia, and the WHO Southeast Asia NCD Regional Technical Advisory Group, and also the WHO Technical Advisory Group on Diabetes. He is fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences, Indian Academy of Sciences, and National Academy of Sciences. He has served as President, Biological Science Section and Vice President of the National Academy of Sciences, and is currently the Vice President of the Indian Academy of Sciences. He has been conferred the prestigious Dr. B.C. Roy Award and also Padam Shri by the Government of India. So I invite Dr. Nikhil Tandon for the oration.
General Puri, Vice Chancellor, Professor Awasthi, Dr. Apul Goyal, distinguished faculty, alumni, residents and students. It is actually a privilege to be here for a range of reasons. And when I was talking with General Puri about what I should do in the oration, he gave me some suggestions. I'm grateful to you, sir, for guiding me in the right direction, because I've learned a lot while preparing for the oration. And you know, several times when somebody is invited for an oration, the issue which comes in mind is, isko kyun bulaya hai? What are his credentials or what are her credentials to being called for the oration? Just because I know the Vice Chancellor, is that the reason I'm here? Well, there'll be a pre-test assessment and a post-oration assessment which will take care of the professional part. But on one set of criteria, I feel I'm very secure, and that's a personal relationship. Whenever there's anything to do with KGMU, I'm strong on the professional, on the personal front. So I'm going to show you some photographs from a while ago. This is actually my father 72 years ago. I'm fortunate that he is still here with me, receiving his Hewitt Medal. Professor Awasthi showed me the board, where she is also a proud presence. And so this is a photograph, the real photograph of him receiving his Hewitt Medal from the governor in 1950. But everybody talks about my father and nobody talks about my mother, which I feel incredibly bad about because she is also an alumnus of this institution. In fact, she is the first MS of obstetrics and gynecology in the state of Uttar Pradesh and from this particular institution. And so I feel that she gets a little bit, as I say, shortchanged because people keep talking about my father. And so I owe it to her that I'm standing here before you, most importantly. These are some photographs from her time. You know, the middle photograph, the lady in the middle of the top row is my mother. The bottom photograph, the lady with a plate, is standing next to a former dean of KGMC, Professor V.S. Manglik, who was also chief of microbiology pathology. I'm not sure if a boat club still exists on the Gomti and its affiliation with this thing. That's my mother at the boat club. And to confirm, in today's days of documentation, which is critical, there is one child in a lap up there, which is me. So this is just to put my credentials for being present here today. I hope they will not be challenged by the audience, at least on a personal front. Before I proceed with the oration, because that's all that I've said, my father specifically sent something for the Vice-Chancellor with a request. It's an autobiography, it's his autobiography, which he would request you, sir, to please place it available at a place where other people can also have a look, maybe the library or someplace, but this is from him to you. Okay, so that's enough about me and my family, which is not why I have been invited here, but as Professor Awasthi said, this is an incredible president. I mean, this was a people's president who was very different from any before and any afterwards. He was really a person who ignited a billion minds, and he was also a quote-a-minute person. I mean, President Kalam could come up with a quotation, you know, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and each one of them had a lot of worth. And this is one of them which is relevant to today's talk. And he said the purpose of education is to make good human beings with skill and expertise. And enlightened human beings can be created by teachers, and we need teachers to perpetuate that. And I think General Puri made a very fair point. I was part of the governing board of governors of the MCI, and it was during our term that there was a significant enhancement in the number of seats. In fact, that was a time for the first time in several years that the number of government-funded medical colleges actually exceeded private medical colleges. And I feel sort of quite happy about that. But the point made is very critical, that we are significantly under-resourced in terms of teachers. So what I will do now is to take you through a narrative of some of the stuff we've done at AIIMS, not to say that that's what should be done, but to give an example. I would appreciate feedback because I think we always learn from feedback, and if there's any message or plus points which you can gain from this, it will be a matter of pleasure. And I will talk about largely technology and its utilization for education, training, and skill enhancement. The first part of my talk will be what we've done for undergraduate students, which is relatively recent, I must confess. And I think partly it was precipitated by the fact, I don't know if you know about this, but AIIMS, from even before I was an undergraduate, had this belief that attendance is not compulsory. We, of course, made the best of that rule, as you can imagine, and we felt that not only was it not compulsory, but we felt it was not required. So a lot of us possibly didn't even know where the lecture theaters were for a long time, but eventually realized that that's not a great thing to do. And then, of course, to make it worse, COVID came when you couldn't call people into lecture theaters. So the undergraduate component of digital technology and skill enhancement is a relatively new thing, but what you'll hear from me is that our postgraduate basic specialties and super specialties actually have been doing that for a much longer period of time. And the first thing I'll talk to you about is something which is a learning management system, which we call SARAL, the online courses and then blended learning at AIIMS. As I said, started as it happened before COVID, but really took strength after COVID for the reasons I've just mentioned. Before we talk about that, and again, General Puri has made my task easier, that the Medical Council of India actually came up with this competency-based undergraduate curriculum. I must say that this was not done by the Board of Governors. The only credit the Board of Governors took was that it was languishing in the ministry for about 5 years. So we managed to extricate it from under the chair of some bureaucrat and bring it up into real life and make it available. So it was released in 2019 or 20, but it was work done by the Medical Council of India by very committed people. And essentially what is important, and it's mentioned out here, is the emphasis on skill enhancement and understanding that, well, we've learned on patients all the while, but you really can't impose yourself on patients, especially if you're going to have 90,000 undergraduates trying to look at, murmurs and heart sounds and stridors and bronchial breathing. It takes a toll on patients more than anything else. And of course, this whole business about how we divide the skills or the process of knowledge into, you need to know things, you need to know how to do things, you then need to actually show how things are done, and that's all prior to contact with unsupervised exposures. But you need all of that, and we've done it conventionally all this while in an in-person way. And I still think that in-person is an important and most important way of doing this. But given the lacunae and deficiencies which have come up, the importance of supplementing that by use of technology, not replacing that by use of technology, but supplementing that by way of technology is important. But before I talk to you, recently we have collaborators in the University of Copenhagen. They run something called the Center for Blended Learning, and they did a landscape of digital education research in India, which brought out what our deficiencies were. And it's always a good place to start as to where we are not adequately suited. One is, of course, structural challenges, right? Inadequate physical infrastructure, I'm sorry to say outdated teaching styles, and I'm very much part of that outdated teaching styles. I like sitting and talking to students. I find it difficult unless I see somebody, scowling or making faces to understand how badly I'm performing. But that's me. But I don't think that can continue for a long time. There is a huge shortage of teaching staff, which is often overburdened. OPD भी करनी है, surgery भी करनी है, मरीज भी देखना है, ये भी करना है, और पढ़ाना भी है. Very difficult. Curricula keeps changing, content keeps changing. Number of health professionals with the skills, more importantly, the passion for education actually is not huge. And then providing a uniformity across a country of our size, very, very difficult. The digital education per se on its own, many challenges. Internet connectivity. The learners lack appropriate devices. You can't learn everything on a smartphone. It's terrible. I mean, screens for small, it's very, very difficult. The learners are heterogeneous. There's a lack of digital competencies of learners, but more importantly, there's a huge lack of digital competencies of teachers. Younger faculty at AIIMS is far more proficient, far more comfortable than using technology than, peri-retirement people are. It's a big digital divide as far as I'm concerned. But the other thing which is important is students unfortunately tend to learn what they're going to be examined in. If there is no examination at the end of the whole thing, it becomes a time pass. So then how do you structure an assessment at the end of a complementary medium of education by way of technology? So this is a story of SARAL. Everybody has acronyms. Humne kaha hum piche kyun hate? So it's called SARAL because it's Students Advanced Resources and Learning Platform. It's Moodle-based. Moodle, for those of you who are not familiar, is free and open source, which is two words which I love, free and open source, but you need people who are technically competent. We have a computer facility, we have a Center for Medical Education and Technology who really have used this to then contextualize it and convert it to our requirements. And this has now become a digital platform for students and teachers. And I'm going to show you a whole string of screenshots to give you a sense. So this is just the home page. Anybody can just log in. You do SARAL and you're there. Then it's the student's dashboard. Once the student logs in, so when I was an undergraduate student, we'd get a printout which said, in this semester, this is your class, this is your lecture theatre, this is the morning lecture, this is the afternoon lecture. It's all, as far as I know, it's gone. But they can see the details of their course and the to-do list of the next 6 upcoming sessions on the first screen that they open up. The course details can be accessed, so this is not restricted to the MBBS students, it's also for our nursing and other students, so it can be looking at their course name. Then details of the course content can be seen by semester by semester. This you can't read what I've written out there, but essentially, so it'll say there is a first lecture, it's on cholera, microbiology, so this is for the 4th semester. So cholera, microbiology, Dr. Gautam will be taking it, that's the venue, which is lecture theatre, that's the time, that's the date. If that person wants you to have done something before you come, there's a click button for there which says view details, right? At the end of each button, you'll see view details for if there's any follow-up stuff you're supposed to do. If not, you're fine. Other events which can happen, which you are obliged to attend, would be a quiz. Maybe like physiology, when I was an undergraduate, actually ran tutorials. So before and after practicals in physiology, we were divided into multiple small groups, and we had a tutorial discussion, which could then become online now, which is forced to become online now because of COVID. Of course, we are back to a hybrid mode at this point in time. If there was an assignment given, you needed to get instructions how you can do the assignment. The teacher can provide the assignment during this, and the teacher can grade an assignment. We are supposed to upload all our lectures on Saral, which means जो 5 लड़के आने वाले थे अब वो भी नहीं आएंगे because they can see it online in their rooms in the evening, right? But jokes apart, skill development is important because, as I said, when there were fewer batch size, I was from a batch size of 50 people. So from a batch size of 50 people, when you're divided into 4 groups when you go for clinical postings, it's 12, 2-3 nahi aayenge, it's 8, it's easier to manage. Now, with the numbers being what they are, it becomes very, very large. So in 2017-18, we developed something called the SET facility, which is an acronym for Skill Enhancement, E-Learning, and Telemedicine. And a lot of work is done through that, and that's why I wanted to introduce it. So this is a traditional way of skill learning, and the UK people did it like that, and I think we learned it from there, which was see one, do one, teach one, right? And that was the be-all and end-all, and that's what we did. But the concern now is numbers, patient safety, non-availability of equal opportunities for students, and you can't keep doing the same. You can't do multiple urinary catheterizations, right? I mean, you can't expose your patients to that sort of a problem. Students' perspective, of course, was that, you know, we don't get a sense of engagement, and therefore students were called in, representatives were called in for discussion. We asked them, "Acha, chalo tum bata do, kya chahte ho? You know, what are the lacunae in this thing?" The biggest lacunae which came was a lack of a structured program for skills. Kitab sab padh lete hain. But the issue was, how do we pick up skills? Now, unfortunately, what has happened is, people picked up skills when they were interns or did their house job. House job system went, it was only internship. Internship, nobody does internship. People study for postgraduate entrance examinations. So that's the reality. So they're not learning any skills. And in the process, a development was done to identify what are the skills which are required and develop a list of these skills. In this, there is an entity called simulation. I shall refer to it intermittently. Please don't go away with the impression that I'm saying everybody should be doing labs with simulation. It's not necessary, but this is a part of a thing which needs to be done. And essentially, it's a process of designing a model of a system and conducting experiments with this model to either understand that system or to evaluate interventions. So, IV line laga raha hai. So you need a system, human beings are there, or you need another way to see, so cannula lagana aata hai ki nahi aata hai. How do you then evaluate that person ki wo cannula theek tarah laga raha hai ki nahi laga raha hai? Endotracheal tube theek tarah dal raha hai, nahi dal raha hai. So you need something like that. And therefore the whole issue of mannequins has come up. They are expensive, they are a problem, but really speaking, they have provided an opportunity to supplement real-life learning. So you can practice the procedures on mannequins, you can have a hands-on experience. It does minimize risk to an individual. I mean, during the process of learning, we know patients can sometimes come into difficulty. You can keep repeating it. The mannequin is not going to complain. There is no guilt of troubling the mannequin, right? You can intubate 50 times and make 40 mistakes, but you can do it repeatedly. It's relatively stress-free. You're not worried that you're going to hurt somebody or do something. You're not, patient is not saying, "Ki kitne aur log dekhoge ab," right? It becomes, so that really helps. And much larger numbers can end up getting trained. And you can simulate anything. You can simulate clinical skills, technical skills. The Vice Chancellor referred to ethics. How do you tell somebody bad news, right? All of that, we're not very well trained in communicating exceptionally well. So the whole story can be done on this. So the concept, therefore, is blended learning. Blended means obviously the in-person component remains. I mean, again, I'm reiterating the fact that the conventional in-person component remains. Blended means you supplement that with something else, which could be digital, which could be online, which could be with a skill lab mannequins. And the way we've done it in many instances is that if there is a skill which is to be learned, there is a preparatory online module which the student has to attend. Whether they do it in the morning, afternoon, night, evening, middle of the night, we're not bothered about it. They then have to take a multiple choice question examination at the end of that. They can take it 1 time, 2 times, 4 times, 10 times, till they pass that. Only then are they allowed entry into that skill learning component of that module. And I'll show you examples as we go along. So there is a before, and that's mandatory. You cannot, and obviously the person who's running that module knows that this person has passed, this person has attended but has not passed, this person has not even attended the online part. So, that blended and then you can do assessments. You can be with logbooks. You can actually do a formal examination, and you can do a certification. So blended learning is a mixture of learning methods that incorporate multiple teaching models. Most frequently, it's e-learning and the traditional face-to-face learning, which we are not dispensing with at all. We're very much on a face-to-face basis, but this supplements it. So you do e-learning for background knowledge and then face-to-face for actual skill training. The face-to-face now is further bifurcated into facing the mannequin, facing the patient. Facing the patient, again, is essential as far as I'm concerned, but these take a little pressure off the patient and give more opportunities. So this is the way it's being done at the moment. This is not, up in the air. This is actually done for undergraduates today at AIIMS. This is through the learning management system. You have the modules which are already uploaded. For example, this is a module on urethral catheterization. There will be a video, and I'll show you an example of a video on that, not urethral, something else. But they need to go and see that video. They will then get a set of multiple choice questions, and once that is done, will they be allowed into a skill lab to learn how to catheterize on the mannequin. So this is from the SET facility. First, the person who makes the module has to create the standard operating procedures. What is it that they want to communicate through this module? How will they communicate it? What is the equipment required? What is the digital resource that's required? What do they want the student to do? How will they assess whether it's worked well or whether the module itself was garbage and we just got to make a fresh one? So it all has to be done first. Then they see the video module. So this is an example of the video module for surgical hand washing before you go into theater or before you do any procedure or suturing. Then they do the multiple choice questions after that, right? And then at the end of it, they will get a certificate saying so-and-so has attended the online component of this module. Then they're allowed to go in for skill. So this is where the skill lab is, and this is inaugurated about 4 years ago. You can see the then Health Minister and the Minister of State for Health both there. In fact, the Minister of Health is also trying intubation or something, I'm not sure. See, even they can be allowed to do this. No trauma to the patients, because anybody can come and do that. At the moment, there's a one main lab, which is about 90 square meters. It's got these 15 skill stations. These are the sort of platforms on which the mannequin is kept. But if you can't see, but you have drawers and the mannequins are stored there itself. So it's a fairly self-contained this thing. The top right photograph is the anesthesia faculties on the right-hand side showing how to do an IV cannulation. And then, of course, there are other things happening out there. And this is, so again, different pieces. And as I said, the nursing students also get an opportunity to learn some of their stuff out here. There is a wet lab, which has 5-box endo trainers with laparoscopic stations. But even before this wet lab came into being, the Department of Surgery used to run their own skill lab for minimal access surgery. And again, there's a cold room where, organs, animal organs, etc., can be brought in so that the learnings can be done. And then there are common areas. So if you need to do a classroom-like teaching, there is a small 100-seater studio and then smaller 50 and 25-seater studios. So this is all on one floor. Everything's on one floor. So they can go from the studio and they can get at class, they can go through the module. If they want, they can finish their MCQs there, then they can go into the skill lab. So everything is done, is possibly done there also. So how was this done? You actually needed interested faculty, right? Somebody has to champion. Really, and the younger the faculty, the better it is as far as I'm concerned. They're really good at this. Their comfort with digital technology, their comfort with technology per se is exceptional, and therefore we've ended up taking faculty from 15 clinical and pre and paraclinical departments, and they developed the model. You can see some. So this was the first set of modules which was developed, which was integrated into the undergraduate curriculum in 2019. This is about 30 odd, 8 and 8, 16, 20, 27. This number is about 70 modules at this point in time, right? And this is, so AIIMS has always worked on a large, because we had the luxury of being outside MCI, we have 50% internal assessment. So in first prof and second prof, we used to have mid-semester exam, end-semester exams, all of that. So by the time you took your profs, 50% of the marks are already taken care of. And similarly for your final prof for the clinical stuff, your posting assessments add up to 50%, 25% for pre-prof, and then 50% for the prof. So this now contributes to the internal assessment. So students have no choice. It is part of an examined system. It's not कि चलो ये भी चल रहा है, ये video देख लेते हैं. नहीं. You have to clear this. So as I said, the process was development of the skill module was the standard operating procedures, learning objectives, indications, what equipment do you need, what are the complications, what are the contraindications for the procedure, make an AV file, which is animation. Everything is done in-house. We don't go outside of the institution. Compulsory multiple choice questions, certificate for students only after MCQs have been passed, and then they go through to a checklist, and finally they enter into the lab. The content development workshop was done by these 30 people whose photographs you see, led by Professor Ashok Deorari, who was our then head of pediatrics and very, very committed to this whole process. And they developed a first phase model, and then the residual faculty developed it. Now, I'm going to maybe show you a very brief video. I'm not sure how I can move it along, but anyway. So this was a basic suturing part. So the first thing was the SOPs. Second part is the equipment. You see कि cleaning के लिए क्या करना है, draping के लिए क्या करना है, forceps चाहिए, needle holder चाहिए, और बाद में पट्टी लगाने के लिए क्या करना है. And then again this part, and finally the video. So the video will come on. So I will. So these were the MCQs then. मैं बताऊंगा आपको, एक मिनट इधर आ जाओ. Key skin suturing effects, in which of the following patients is advisable to leave the wound open, needle should be inserted kaise, etc., 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 which is information they should have got by seeing the video. This is the video, and okay.
Hello everyone, in this e-tech
I'm not going to run this whole video, it's a 7-minute video.
Skin suturing.
This is done by faculty in surgery.
The should be able
they will start by taking you through learning objectives.
Using interrupted, vertical mattress and subcuticular techniques. Skin suturing refers to a method for closing cutaneous wounds. The primary goals of suturing are as follows that are required for cleaning includes a needle holder. The is inserted into the other ring. The index finger and this phalanx are used to support the scissors. So the silk, nylon and monofilament sutures are used for skin suturing. Exposure of the affected part come out of the tissue.
And then the whole
reload the needle in the needle holder at the desired side.
Simple suture.
Keep the needle holder between the two suture ends. Make 2 circular loops over the needle.
Then we'll go on to mattress.
Secure the knot and the skin edge is held with the forceps. The first bite is taken in incision and we are now having both the threads of the suture and the thread is tied perpendicular to it. Hello everyone.
So, I mean, I just didn't want to spend too much time, but basically it's a 7-minute video which takes you through everything, made internally, narrated by a faculty in general surgery, and through animation telling everybody kaise karna hai, kaise. It's not new. I mean, these videos like this have been available from outside for a long time, but this was done keeping in mind what we think we need to teach our students, and it was done locally. That was the basic thing, and that also means that once you get your hands set on doing stuff like this, then you just carry on doing. You can add another 20 modules. You don't have to depend on an external resource. Initial investment, but then external resource is not required. And again, you can see, so intubation chal raha hai, intramuscular injection chal raha hai, checklist kya hai, intramuscular injection, all of this is then taken care of. So that's where we stand with undergraduate. As I said, about 70 modules developed. And they start from 4th semester, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, all the way up. They keep learning different things which we think are relevant for them, and that contributes to the internal assessment. But this is very recent. What about basic specialties? Surgeons have always relied a lot on sort of skill labs, and rightfully so. Again, let me just clarify. My wife is an ophthalmologist, and so the ophthalmologist at AIIMS, and I'm sure several other places, actually used to learn on goat eyes. I mean, you don't need fancy equipment. You don't need a lab, except for you need a separate space. You don't want to contaminate the same OT with animal organs. But they used to learn suturing, etc., as and when, you know, from simple intracapsular cataracts, they went to the ECC IOLs, and surgery became more complex, using the microscope, hand-eye coordination, put a microscope and get the eyes from animals and practice on that. So it's been around, and surgeons have really done, taken the lead in this. So this is a brief snapshot on integrated training in minimal access surgery, and this is from one of my colleagues in Department of Surgery. Very clearly, their belief has been that it shortens the learning curve for a lot of procedures, which is logical to understand. It improves operative skills, it reduces operative time, it reduces complications, and then everything comes back to patient safety being a very, very important part. And so this particular skill lab, which precedes the wet lab, which I talked to you about in the SET facility, had 6 stations, each which could handle 2 participants, had equipment, had hand instruments, and eventually, they've evolved into developing, which is again now a very common program in many parts of the country, and MCH in minimal access in general surgery. So this was where they, especially with laparoscopic surgery, they felt that this was a very, very important asset for them. In every year, each candidate was doing 120 hours in the lab, right? So it's over and above whatever exposure. Nowadays, with the number of surgical residents, without disrespect, some of them are not even holding retractors. I mean, they're at the door of the operation room, seeing the screen because everything is being done laparoscopically. So this became something which is important. All the fundamental laparoscopic skills were being already taught to them. Whether they were box trainers, whether they were actual animal organs, that whole thing actually has been done for several years in general surgery, even before the undergraduate students got exposed to that. Does it work? Now, we have a way of doing an assessment for undergraduate students. Here, the important thing was, fine, we've invested money, we bought in trainers, we get animal organs, we help them suture, but does it really make a difference to where we want it to make a difference? Does the trainee surgeon become better? And so these people have actually done a series of studies, and I'm going to show you an example of one observational and one randomized control trial to see whether this additional training exposure is making a difference. So, for example, in this there was basically this was based on short-term courses, our short-term focused training courses on a phantom model, helping acquiring skills. 250 odd surgeons, half of them had no prior exposure, half of them had prior exposure, and without going into complex details of what they did, they clearly found that training improved their operating room performance, and this is actually published in a peer-reviewed journal. And this was a randomized control trial in which they looked at general surgery residents randomized to either standard training or laparoscopic training group, and again ended up feeling that there was a significant improvement in their task-specific checklists, in their operative skills. So this is what general surgery has done for a long time. But surprisingly, well before that, it was the super specialty department, surgical, which did that. And this is now in the last bit of my oration, which will take you through what neurosurgery has done at AIIMS for a long period of time. And that doesn't mean that the other departments have not done it. So simulation in neurosurgical training, and you can understand that you don't want too many people fiddling with the man's brain, has been around for a long time. Now this is the whole scope of training methods and the skill assessment tools. Remember, imparting training and sort of imparting skills, you need to do some sort of measurement. You're not doing it for fun. You're doing it for an objective to improve the skills. So the training methods have, in this particular neurosurgical education training system, have been initially physical, using mannequins or live animals, or using papayas or capsicum or eggshells, but anything which will allow them to make burr holes, do drilling, anything, right? And they were then doing an assessment which was based on formal assessment of seeing the result at that point in time. It's more than 50 years since the experimental neurosurgery laboratory was set up by Dr. Banerjee and my father. So that's a really long time. And the first workshop was held in 1976, and every subsequent head of department has really been intensely involved in this component of training. Currently, the person who runs, has the most focus on this is Dr. Ashish Suri, who very kindly shared a lot of material for my presentation. They were also smart enough to reach out to non-institutional sources or non-AIIMS money. So they got money from the Department of Science and Technology and from various other grants. And as you can see, they not only developed this over a period of time, but they also now have developed practical guidelines on how to set up a neurosurgery skill lab. Right? And this was published in Neurology India for our setting. We're not interested in how US does it or Europe does it or how the UK does it. This is what should be and can be done, and this is available through a 40-year experience in this particular thing. And then, of course, they went on to higher levels of simulation facilities, again through grants, and I'll show you the structure. And the structure is very neat now. The structure is open to neurosurgical trainees from different places, and of course for our own trainees. There are either a 2-week skill training program or a 4-week skill training program, depending on what you want and depending on what your prior exposure is. And they go through this entire process. It's delineated day 1, day 2, morning, evening, whether they're going to learn drilling, advanced drilling, endoscopy, reinforcement, what is the equipment required, whether they're going to use a sheep head, whether they're going to use an eggshell, whether they're going to use papita, whether they're going to use Shimla mirch. Everything is down there in sort of key detail. And then the 4-week skill training program, which is much more comprehensive. So it's a structure. Now, the advantage of the structure is you know what you're doing. If you find out later that it's not doing a job, you can analyze the structure, change the structure. And that is sort of a very important part of this. And over 2,000 neurosurgical, ENT, general surgical, GI surgery, maxillofacial, orthopedics, and plastic surgery residents have actually, and faculty have actually been trained on this. And these courses have been run endlessly. I mean, there's an annual microneurosurgery course, which is like now it's a big jalsa for neurosurgery. It's an event. It's their Kumbh Mela, which happens on a regular basis. What has happened over a period of time is from a self-assessment which is done by the trainee and expert assessment, which is both objective and subjective, it's now realized that they needed to go to another level, and that is to get more structure and get virtual reality into their training program. So this is, of course, just a string of modules which they now run, which is neuroanatomy, neuroendoscopy, microneurosurgery, drilling, and more recently spine. So again, the orthopedic surgeons come in to participate in this particular process. And this slide essentially is telling you that they've actually continued to evolve. So if you look at the years below, they established this neurosurgery education and training school, and over the period of time, they started with microsuturing, brought in endoscopy and drilling with time, and now they do a video recording of that process, which can then be adjudicated later on, and they've brought in virtual reality to assist. Not only now they've gone ahead beyond mannequins, and this is being done on a day-to-day basis, and this is for our residents. So if you're a 3-year, that is post-general surgery, 3-year MCH, this is what you're done exposure in year 1, year 2, year 3. And if you're a 6-year resident, in which is you're coming directly after MBBS, the first year and a half, 2 years are in general surgery and other rotations. So from 3rd year onward, what is going to be your training exposure? Again, very clearly delineated that these objectives have to be met. As I said, they've now gone ahead to virtual reality, and this has been a huge enhancement. And the important thing here is it is in-house, right? So they've gone ahead now to include VR-based training. And for this, what they did was a strong collaboration with IIT Delhi. And therefore, everything which is being done out here has been made in conjunction between the AIIMS Neurosurgery Department telling IIT Delhi, this is what we want, back and forth, and the technology part is developed out there so that all the VR models are in-house, which also means that if they want to change, add, subtract, or do something different, they have that internal competence. So if they have to print out a benchtop model, they do their own 3D printing and take care of it. And that's the lab there, which is the neuroengineering lab, which is the AIIMS IIT Delhi combination. And this is again the vision and graphics lab in which the animation graphics are created, tested, and then locked before they're used by the students over time. As I said, all animation models are developed in-house, and there's no collaboration with any industry partner. So that really makes it, a sort of a self-sustained model and all. We've been very lucky in one thing, and I'm sure the same thing would be available here, is for this purpose, the National Knowledge Network, which is, Bharat Sarkar, gave us a lot of terabytes of storage space, because these are very clunky in terms of the amount of speed and the storage that is required, right? And again, this just examples of microscopic simulation, neuroendoscopy simulation, high-speed drilling simulation. All of these are simulation models. So, they've had a head start. They started 50 years ago, and they've evolved over a period of time. So it's a much more comprehensive training, and this happened over a period of time. So I'm going to stop here by saying that it is actually a very different world out there for each one of us from the time we started medical education to where it is and will be by the time we sort of superannuate and move ahead. It is critical for us to take on board other resources. Conventional teaching is important. For me, it's the foundation, it's the bedrock, and it is not dispensable in any way. But it can definitely be supplemented, enhanced, and supported by non-conventional methods. And we should not be averse to the biggest advantage of experimenting with those methods is if you fail, you just have another method to go back to. You're not hurting or harming anybody in the way you're doing it. So innovations in teaching and training technology are therefore an important supplement. Technology is crucial, but you need the teacher, irrespective of whether you are doing an in-person, on-patient training or doing technology-based training. The key person is the teacher, right? And that teacher has to be involved and really sort of invested in that whole process of teaching. And I said each one of these programs, as I said, very, very, very open confession, I have zero contribution in anything that I've shown out here. Zero. right? But since it was a talk on medical education, I thought it was important to communicate it. But as a person, I've done nothing. I upload my lecture slides on the Saral platform, and that is the extent of my contribution to this whole thing. Grudgingly, कि अच्छा ये भी करना पड़ रहा है, नहीं तो वहाँ पे slide लगा लेते थे, आसानी थी. But anyway, we do that. So it needs a steward and it needs a champion. You need an institutional leadership which will say, I'll find the money, jao, karo. And then you need people who are willing to spend time. Everybody is busy. Everybody's OPDs run from morning to night. Everybody is in theater. And then everybody wants to do some other things which are more interesting. But you need it. And each one of these trainings have had champions who've really driven it. Ek insan to chahiye hota hai. But we've been fortunate. For the SET facility, there's a whole cadre of young faculty who've taken it on themselves to prove that the old-timers really didn't do a good enough job. I think that's a great challenge for them too, and I would sort of take them onto the challenge. So I'm going to stop here, but I must spend a minute and acknowledge the people. So Ambuj is our professor of cardiology. He's a professor in charge of this whole SET facility. So he's the bandobast man. He ensures that things work, which is critical because mannequin kharab ho gaya, ye nahi mila, organ nahi aaya, market se papite khatam ho gaye, whatever. So you need that. Tony Jacob is from anatomy, very committed young faculty, brilliant in digital. I mean, he's really, really phenomenal. Anu is from pediatrics, again, amongst the clinical, non-surgical departments. The surgeons clearly had a head start on skills. Pediatrics is there's no procedure happening there, but pediatrics really did a lot of good work. And Anu is so Dr. Deorari was the one who was very important. He's now superannuated, and Anu is really the champion out there. So she will drive this whole process. Virender Bansal is the minimally invasive surgeon. Again, completely invested in this whole running the minimally invasive lab. And the name who got cut out, but anyway, don't worry about it. There was just the last name, Ashish Suri, who is our neurosurgeon, who has driven this whole microneurosurgical simulation business over the last 10 years, taken the time to write up and get money from non-institutional sources. I see him go. So the microneurosurgery lab is in the animal house. Our building in endocrinology is right there. I see Ashish going every day, if not 2 or 3. Before he goes into OT, he drops in there. In between cases, he drops in there. He's there. So you need that sort of commitment. So I hope I've tried to do the job which the Vice Chancellor had hoped that I'd do, and share an experience. Again, I'm going to stop by saying only 2 things. This is harnessing technology for complementing conventional education. This is not a replacement by any stretch. And the second thing is that you really need a lot of people to give their time, their passion, and commitment for this, because this is how the National Medical Council now believes is the way forward, which is a competency-based curriculum in which skill learning is a central and core part. Thank you so much.
That was indeed an excellent oration, an eye-opener to see what in New Delhi, 40 flying minutes away, they are developing. 70 modules for undergraduates, the pre-test, the rigor with which they do it, how 50% of the marks are already achieved before you go for the professional, the PG courses, and then what Dr. P.N. Tandon and Dr. Banerjee established, which has been the role model for others. What is most important and good for me to hear is we look upon our young faculty. It is the young people who have to take it up as we pass the baton to the young people to come develop these skills modules. And if we don't emulate AIMS, what else can we emulate? They have done it in India and they have succeeded. A pass out from AIMS, you trust. A pass out from KGMU, you trust. But let us give the KGMU pass out the same credentials, the same passport that the AIMS pass out gets. So with those messages, we are really inspired by you. we understand that there has been a Department of Medical Education for many years. There has been a non-medical faculty in your department, and we have attended courses, invited them, but the NMC has fallen short, and they haven't created a Department of Medical Education. They have said co-opt members, which is also good in a way, because if you don't co-opt, you don't understand. But having said that, there's a long way to go, and the journey never ends. You saw AIMS. Our journey is in infancy, and we look forward to younger faculty to take up and become the best in the country. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I invite our Vice Chancellor, sir, to felicitate our speaker, Dr. Apul. Thank you, all of you. Thank you to Honorable Vice Chancellor, to Dr. Tandon, Dr. Apul, all the members of medical education, all faculty, all students, all deans and pro-VC. And we come to an end of our 5th Dr. APJ Kalam oration. Thank you.